Today, we're going to discuss how Damien Peters created multiple online media companies, lived abroad with his family in Spain, and made work optional by leveraging his 9 to 5 and investing in real estate. During Damien Peters' tech career, he led product teams at big tech companies and startups such as Facebook, aka Meta, and Zynga. In 2017, Damien was the first African-American hired to lead product at Facebook, so it's no surprise that he is an advocate for diversity in tech. Outside of his 9 to 5, he started several online media companies, with the most recent being acquired in 2022. His passion for lifestyle design led him to move his entire family to Spain for 2 years. Transforming his tech salary into profitable real estate investments has enabled Damien to accumulate wealth for himself and his family, earning him financial independence. Damien is smart too. He received 2 degrees in computer science and economics from the University of Maryland and his MBA from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. He currently lives in Washington, D.C., where he spends most of his time with his family and is actively growing and managing his real estate portfolio. Hey, Damien, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing really good. Long time in making. I've known you for a couple of years now, and really excited to be here. Really excited.
Me too. I don't know why it took this long for me to get you on the mic, but because you've always had a great story. And for those that don't know, I'm going to tell you a little background about how Damien and I met. So I want to say in 2016, I got this great idea that I should become a freelance writer because I like to talk about money and I like to write. So I did a Google search, how to become a freelance writer. And Google told me to go to Upwork and post a profile and tell people why I'm so amazing and how well I write. And while I was building my profile, I actually did a search for available jobs. And you had a post up about writing for Wealth Noir, a new online magazine for Black millennials to teach them about money. And I immediately fell in love with not only the position description, but responded. And then the rest is history. We talked, I did some test articles, and 4 or 5 years later, I was still writing for you. So.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. You were, I remember you were my first writer, and even I remember thinking like, man, if I can find this caliber of people like this easily, this is going to be easy. Like, they're just out here with amazing backgrounds, like deep knowledge, and down for the mission. But yeah, no, it's crazy how much we've worked together in terms of like various ventures and different formats and conferences together and stuff like that. So
yeah, you're also how I discovered FinCon, which thank you so much. In 2018, FinCon changed my life, and for those that don't know, that's a conference where money nerds meet. And so it's just been really good. But today we're actually going to talk about you and what you've been able to accomplish by investing in real estate and leveraging your 9 to 5 tech jobs. So I want to start from the beginning, and I hope this is not too far for you, but I want to know, what was money like for you when you were growing up?
So I've been told even before I can remember that I've always been I don't want to say obsessed with money, but very focused or money minded. My grandmother used to joke that if there was change, I would always keep it. I always had like coins around. And even in high school, I used to remember going to the mall with everybody. I've always been a bit frugal, so I wasn't trying to spend my money, but I always realized, so I'm like ordering the smallest meal, but I could comfortably pay for it, where everyone else was like borrowing some money or like, oh, let me not get this because I don't have it. So I read Rich Dad Poor Dad at some point in high school, and then The Millionaire Mind So I just always had this thought of like, working. I got a job at 15 because in Maryland you could get it at 15 instead of 16 and things along those lines. Even when in high school, I remember I was in a science and tech high school and program. I wanted to switch to business. My dad actually told me, he's like, don't do that. He's like, you're good with the computers. That's where you're going to make your money. Don't worry, later in life, you can go off and study business and add that on something, which ironically is exactly what happened. But I always thought that, business and money and investing and things like that were just appealing. It seemed, I don't know why, to be honest, but I just always, was drawn to it. So, even heading into school, I studied computer science, at the behest of my dad, and I added on economics as a second degree later on because ironically, when I decided to do it, I was too late to get into the business school. I was too late. It was like junior year, but I could add on economics easily. So I actually got like a double degree. And that really just helped give me this really strong base in terms of understanding both how markets work, concepts like supply and demand, where markets go up, even when the Fed is doing things like, I have an understanding of this that, is deeper. And I'm just really a econ and money nerd. So yeah, my start early on. And then one other thing too, I'll say is my dad was always an entrepreneur. He loved to say he was like allergic to a job. He was in media for a long time. He was actually a journalist, and then he ran a print shop and a travel agency. He didn't believe in selling real estate. So when we moved from our first house to our second house, we kept it as a rental in the house. So imbued a lot on me in terms of running your own company, investing in real estate, having these multiple sources of income. Those are some things. He was really terrible with spending and saving money though. So he was great with the income, but luckily I had my mom for that. So my mom actually was a nurse, but she had a financial advisor and she saved, and was really happy to tell my mom one day when she retired that she was a millionaire. And I was like, Mom, you came to this country, you were a nurse, you worked for a long time, but because you saved, you've done really well. And she still doesn't care. To be honest, she's just like, well, good, I'm glad I saved the money. So yeah, that's kind of like where I got my start, rooted in my family and some things like that.
I love that. Where's your mom originally from?
Both my parents are from Antigua, originally.
That's nice. I love Antigua. I have a special place in my heart for there. So it's interesting, like publishing and travel are not, to my knowledge, related in any way. So why did your dad have those two types of companies? Do you know?
Yeah. He was, and this is an area I've started to get really interested into as of late, which is just kind of business operators. In terms of the travel agency, and this was around, by the time I was conscious, right? I think he may have started after I was born, but by the time I was old enough to remember, that was the company he had. He ran a travel agency. He had an office in DC and then one in LA. Not sure how he got started into that. The printing, he ended up found he was doing, this is back before the internet. So he was doing a lot of flyers for promoting the travel agency and things along those lines. He just got into that business. So he started doing the print business in addition to the travel agency. Eventually he sold the travel agency to actually a family member who was also working for the travel agency and continued to run it for several decades later. But yeah, he ended up going into taxes later on, but that's why I said he was fundamentally allergic to a job. He did not like the idea of working for someone else. And I think he gravitated to businesses that made sense for him, that he either had an opportunity at the time and that he knew he could kind of like grow and run consistently.
And today we would call that a serial entrepreneur, because none of those businesses in my mind are immediately related, but he successfully ran them, sold one, and seemed to have a pretty good run. So that's good. Now, you mentioned that your dad pushed you to kind of stick to the computer science space, but why would he inspire you to do that? Was there someone you knew in the tech space, or did he just see the future of tech and where it was going and thought, my son needs to be in this?
So when I had a natural proclivity to computers, I'll say at the time I was very much a computer nerd, just like a quiet, geeky kind of middle school, high schooler. So he had brought home a computer. This is like an Intel 386. So this is what early 90s, I think, and really obsessed over it. Just, before there was even Windows and it was like, the actual terminal, play random games, things along those lines. And when Windows came, I remember for Christmas once I got a hard drive, and it was a 6.4 gigabyte hard drive. My previous hard drive, I think, was 2. And I literally like almost fell on the floor out of excitement to have 6.4 gigabytes of storage on my computer. So by time, high school came, I was building my own computers. I had gone to like a computer camp one summer for a couple of weeks. And, by my senior year too, I was in like computer programming classes. So he was like you're already programming. And interestingly too, he actually dropped out of computer science in undergrad. I found this out like decades later. And he was like, yeah, I always think, had I stuck with it, what, how much money I would have made, or like kind of what my career would have been. So he was very correct. He just had the foresight. He was like, computers and tech is where he's seeing like money and jobs and opportunities. Business is, no knock to anyone who does business, because I have that myself too, but he's like, it's a little bit more general, and it's if you get business later with the specialization in kind of computers and technology, it will help you better than doing just business itself. And now we can definitely say he had a crystal ball into the future, because tech is a career and job path is like blown up. But yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the fastest growing industries, and definitely a space where anyone can make 6 figures easily because of the expertise, the knowledge, and where so many companies are going. So now is the question as to how in the heck did you go from being in tech to launching online media companies? What was the first media company you launched, and what idea or action inspired it?
Yeah. So, ironically, I would say I was pseudo in media before I was officially in tech. I started a blog back in undergrad. It was just called like The Real Thoughts of DP or something, like Damien Peters. And it was around dating. At the time, I was a bit of an angsty college student. I just had certain thoughts about like dating and being in the streets. I'd go out a good bit in terms of women and men. So I just was writing this blog. And then fast forward a couple of years. I stopped the blog at some point. I kind of, but it was interesting to kind of like write and publish online. I'm a government consultant. I work at Booz Allen Hamilton. I'm in DC. I actually have a government clearance at this point. And I was dating out in the streets. I was a good bit out the streets. I like buying bottles. To this day, I still love buying a good bottle. And
I'm learning so much about you right now.
Oh yeah, no, the bottle is an ongoing joke. Even later in Spain, the clubs in Spain don't close until 8 in the morning, which is really great. But so at some point, I was dating someone, and something happened. I can't remember what, but I was just like, I'm going to take a break from women for like 2 weeks. I'm just going to like stop dating and focus on me. I realized I had so much extra time when I wasn't dating. And that actually prompted Single Black Male, which was a dating blog that I started in 2007. And it was a continuation of this idea of like me writing about dating from back in undergrad, but I wanted to be a branded experience. I bought the domain. I started writing, and eventually continued just to write in addition to my day job. Eventually went back to dating and things like that, but would write about buying girls drinks in the club, or like the rules of engagement. Started the site aimed at men, saying that men don't have a place to talk and kind of complain about dating and stuff like that. Quickly realized men do not care on the internet about dating and relationships. It's just, they're not going to click on it. But Black women really were drawn to the fact that there was a man talking about stuff that like men don't ever talk about, like why we stopped calling, or why I'm not trying to buy you a drink in the club, or why you can't just come up to my table and drink from my bottle and, expect to walk away. Anyways, stupid stuff that young people do. That ended up attracting one of my co-founders, who ended up going on later on to start another podcast, and several others. But we ended up growing that site to 4 people. We incorporated, we started getting big brand deals. We started doing talks. We hosted happy hours in DC and New York. So we really blew that. What started as just like me talking about girls and dating from this break into several different people where we were doing live events, talks, and blogs. And we peaked at around 500,000 like page views per month. So I was really excited to see what we could do. We learned a lot. We grew along with Twitter because we were early on Twitter when Facebook came out in terms of utilizing pages, and you just understood a lot about digital marketing. That then, actually kind of led to eventually later on Wealth Noir, because as I was thinking about what to do and the concept, and so even while I was at Facebook, we were still running the company. At that point, I wasn't writing anymore. Most of us weren't writing anymore. We had hired writers. We had several different executive editors. We had operating agreement and things along those lines. How we actually ran the business. But yeah, there was a lot that I learned from that blog, both negotiating equity when you formulate the company. And we had someone who left because they thought their share wasn't fair, but we had like a process that we went through, incorporating and, dealing with Delaware versus not Delaware and the various taxes and bookkeeping and all of that good stuff. And a lot of that really helped later on, both to, start the second company and even eventually exit it.
We're going to talk about that, guys. Don't worry. I have some questions here about building a business for acquisition and how that works. But that's really interesting. So your thoughts turned into a business and then led to partnerships. And eventually you started another online business. But what is the state of that website now? Is it still up? Have you taken it down? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, no. So which one? Single Black Male?
Yeah.
Yes. No, so you can check it out now, singleblackmale.org. It is still up. It still actually generates a good tens of thousands of people go to that site every month because we were so ingrained and we had so many articles and different sites and Google ranking and things along those lines. Currently contemplating whether to actually bring that company back, relaunch it, and to your point, prepare it for sale and thinking about that. But it's for years, and this is one thing too about kind of starting companies and stuff like that, around 2016 we stopped actively running the site. I actually bought out the rest of the partners. There was some kind of poor management around that time, and it didn't really make sense, I think, to dedicate some time to it, but it continued to generate money, and I still can usually buy a beer or two a month just from the passive ad revenue.
Awesome. That's really interesting. So now we started this story talking about how we met via Upwork and Wealth Noir, which was an online publication I wrote for several years, everything from blogs to interviews and mostly about money. What inspired you to start Wealth Noir? And yeah, let's just start there. What inspired you to start it?
Yeah. So I'll say from Single Black Male, that got me excited about entrepreneurship. And in particular, what I like to call part-time entrepreneurship. This idea that I could be running a company on the side that was profitable, that added fulfillment, because government consulting is, it's government consulting. It's giving talks in front of college students around like dating and relationships was just like personally very interesting to me. So even after, to the point where I wasn't actively writing and doing as much with Single Black Male, I always was looking for my next idea. While I was in grad school, it was a it was a link shortener that was going to be dynamic for app downloads because I was working at Zynga and we had this whole thing about app downloads. Then worked on a dating concierge company. And typically with all of these, I would set up actually a landing page. I would buy ads. I would have a survey. I would actually do a bunch of customer research. I would talk to a bunch of companies. And there were a few other ideas that kept coming. And then one ended up being Wealth Noir. So the start for Wealth Noir was my wife comes to me. I'm working at Facebook, enjoying Facebook, making very good money. And my wife's like, "We're pregnant." I was like, "Great," because we've been trying. And so we're pregnant. She's like, "Are you ever going to see the baby?" I was like, "What what do you mean by that? She's like, you work all the time. You fly to London 3 to 4 times a year. You're in New York like every month or every other month. And then Seattle, like I'll do day trips to Seattle for a meeting. I was like, fair point. It may not be around that much. So I'll take a year off. So I told everybody at work, I was like, I'm planning to take a year off. And they're like, how can you afford a year off? And I was like, we work at Facebook. We're highly compensated. Why can't anyone here afford a year off? It's just, a year off. At this point, I had 2 rental properties, a lot of savings, like several $100,000, just saved and invested, both taxable and retirement accounts. And I realized, and then when I would go talk to African Americans, lawyers, doctors, things like that, heads would explode. How can you dare take a year off? And I was like, if you're highly compensated, why are people not investing in their wealth and their passive income in other areas? And that was the birth of Wealth Noir. It was I realized there was a unique opportunity and unique audience for high income African American millennials, and really we expanded to be all millennials, but high income, but not building wealth. They're not investing in real estate. They don't have stock portfolios. They don't understand their money, and that was a community I specifically connected with. I knew that I could, reach, and I thought that there would be really great product ideas that we can build and directly target this audience, because they have the assets, or they have the income, and they can build the assets, but they're just unaware of what to do. So from there, I actually came up with a name. Eventually landed on Wealth Noir, and I shopped it. I tested it we were waiting in brunch one day, going to brunch one day in Oakland, and I asked like 3 women who passed by, and this other guy, what they thought of the name Wealth Noir. And then I told them the concept, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds really nice." And I was like, "Great, that's the user validation I need. I'll start there."
Love it. Yeah. Love it. And you asked total strangers, so they had no reason to lie to you. But I love it because it definitely had like a upscale type of feel to it. Most people don't know Noir is Black and in French. Yeah. And then you have the wealth. So I think it's a perfect combination, and I love that you tested it. But I am not surprised, because I am also in the financial space, and I meet a lot of professionals who make good money and they just don't know what to do with it. So I'm glad that you sought out to fill that demand, and you ran Wealth Noir for several years. How did you get to the point of it being acquired? Was that an intentional move, or was that something that just happened by pure luck?
So I won't say pure luck, but it was not, I wasn't seeking an acquisition at the time. And I know a lot more about acquisitions now than, less than a year ago when I was going through the process, but it actually started with a DM on LinkedIn. So I am 100% sold on LinkedIn as a platform. Like, honestly, my DMs in LinkedIn have led to hundreds of thousands of dollars, like several jobs, and my acquisition. But it was someone who I worked with at Facebook. We actually started at Facebook on the same day together, both as product managers. And I get a DM saying like, "Hey, we've raised a couple $1 million with my co-founder. We're starting a fintech company focused on wealth management and financial advisory. Would you be interested?" And not to brag or anything, I've gotten several of these messages before. Actually, even had another friend who was actually raising for another financial fintech company who I went to MIT with. So I was like, "Send me over the deck, I'll look at it." The deck really sold me on the company. I was like, I really like this idea. And I actually had really contemplated taking Wealth Noir and starting financial advisory. Quick sidebar, while the cost can be high, so I don't necessarily say I recommend it for every single person, but working with a financial advisor is the kind of most consistent way I found for someone to handle their money. One thing with Wealth Noir, I always say there was a tactical and emotional aspect. Tactically, we could teach people, and that was easy for us. We could teach you how to create an investment portfolio, how to think about a stock and bond allocation, how to invest in real estate. The emotional part was super hard for us. A lot of people would know everything they need to know. They've written 82 books. They have, this is a personal story, a friend, $90,000 in the bank in cash, and was like, "I want to invest in real estate." And I said, he was earning $250,000 at the time. And I was like, "Invest in real estate. I don't understand the problem." he couldn't get over the emotional purpose part of it. But I told myself, in terms of turning Wealth Noir into this type of business, it would require more capital and people than I was comfortable with doing at the time. I started Wealth Noir as more of a lifestyle business. The aim was to move to Spain and spend time with the family. So when we started talking specifically about the role first. What were they looking? Who are they looking for? Kind of what were they needing in terms of the company? And then second, we started talking about what, not just Damien Peters, but Damien Peters and Wealth Noir. This is what we call a acqui-hire. It's an acquisition and hire. Very common very common in tech, but it means that in addition to the company, one of the key resources they're looking for is actually the talent and the people, as opposed to just like the physical infrastructure. So when we continue to talk about both the role, and in particular, what I thought at this time was, for me to take this role, I'm very excited about this role. I cannot give Wealth Noir the attention and the desire it needs to grow. But I think that what I've built with Wealth Noir will actually be amazing to enhance what we're going to be doing at this company in terms of the marketing, growing an audience, and things along those lines. So after a couple months of negotiation and back and forth, and like numbers and terms, and also one big part too was whether I wanted to work at the company. I met with everyone at the company. I was going to be employee number 8, and the co-founder, I will say, was one thing that drew me to him. He had sold 2 companies prior for quite exits. The amount of money and the quality of venture capital they had raised just with a deck, 2 people, was very, very good. I talked to a lot of my friends in other tech companies, some who had sold their companies in the last year, and so everything really looked good, and it seemed like a really great opportunity. One thing personally motivating me too, both in terms of joining the company and selling my company, was years ago I had an offer to be the first product manager at Robinhood. This was back when I was at Facebook. There were only like 300 people. They were worth well under $1 billion. And I was like, I don't know if this company is going to kind of like really, hit it big or not. At least at their peak, I looked back at my original offer letter. My equity alone would have been worth around $4.3 million. So, I kind of did look a little bit as this, like, well, do I have another chance to get into a fintech company at a really good place that matches, both my aims and aspirations? And that was kind of, what I did. And so, back in January, we kind of finalized everything. At the time, I was actually working at Citi Ventures. I was working at Citibank, working for innovation as an entrepreneur in residence there. So I left Citi, joined the acquiring company, and then moved over the team and several of the assets to be part of the new company.
Wow, that's a very interesting story. And so many things. Like, I feel like there's a whole nother episode we could do on acquisitions and just preparing your company for that space and how to navigate and missed opportunities. I mean, Robinhood, obviously, we know now is huge. It's had some challenges in the past, GameStop and et cetera, but they are still a highly used tech company, app company to buy stock. So that's just crazy. But you set yourself up for success by being in the tech space. So I'm going to pivot a little bit now, because I want to also talk about how you were able to move to Spain for 2 years and pretty much make work optional. What was it that you did to prepare your family for the move to Spain? And what did you do while you were there?
Yeah. All right. So the move to Spain, all right, in terms of preparing my family, that was actually a multi-year process. So I had the bright idea to move abroad. I told my wife, and she was like, sure. I was like, what does sure mean? Like, I'm like, are you in love with this or not? She was like, if you want to move abroad, we can move abroad. And I told her this. I was like, this is a setup, because if you don't like moving abroad, then it's my fault. I want you to be as excited as I am. So this started a multi-year campaign of taking her to London, and we went to France, we went to Thailand. I was talking with different companies and different offices. I was talking about transferring to the Facebook London office. There was a company I interviewed with in Bangkok. France had certain roles too. There was a Facebook office there, et cetera, et cetera. And what really kind of tipped the scale was when our baby was born. So after leaving Facebook, I actually joined a nonprofit. I'm actually on the board of them now, called Dev Color, focused on Black software engineers. So I'm working there along with working on Wealth Noir. And one day, I think the baby was 2 months, and she was like, "I'm ready to move abroad." I was like, "You know what?" She was like, "I just really thought about it. Like, if we don't do it now, it's always going to be harder. He's going to be like in school and have like really commitment to friends." So, and I was like, "Great." And so I'm like, let me, I pull out my list of like 35 countries, and she's like, "No, you can move to Italy or Spain. They have good healthcare. They're comfortable. I'm down with those two." I was like, "Say less."
Let's
Italy or Spain.
go.
Let's go. So pick Spain because Spanish was a little bit more useful than Italian. Although I think I'd like Italy to live there as a country, but Spain was a ton of fun. And then we went through the process of actually getting prepared. We started doing some research more in terms of what it would look like, what would we do. We actually contemplated, there was a whole little chart, right? Either we both go there and we go there and get jobs. We go there without jobs, or we kind of like go there with fake jobs, like we look to work part-time or remote or something along those lines. And there's different qualities of life, right? We get a cheap apartment, we don't work, we get jobs over there, and we live our comfortable lifestyle. But at the time too, I like to say I had been saving and investing. I didn't know for what. I had a few $100,000 in the bank, and I had the 2 rental properties, and I didn't know what I was saving for. I just knew I wanted to save a ton of money. I was very focused. I was very aggressively saving. We were saving about 40 to 50% of our income each year at this time. And we went to, we did some research. We decided to move to Barcelona. As soon as you Google move to Barcelona, they tell you why Valencia is better. So we said, okay, let's go to Valencia. We took our son. We actually went there for 2 weeks. We did a test run. We found daycare. We found apartments. We found a realtor. And we both really, really liked it. We enjoyed it. We thought it would be a good move. And we planned for 6 months. It was, I think, 6 or 8 months to wind everything down, figure out the jobs we were going to do, and get the visas, and made a plan and executed against it. I will say, and I didn't realize this until after we did it and we're in Spain, it was way more work than I did anticipate. Super optimistic. Hey, this isn't easy. We just go to the consulate, we send some stuff, we'll call some movers, and then boom, we'll be in Spain. They seem to speak pretty good English. I think we'll be all right. They don't speak pretty good English. The movers told us like 2 months. It was like 7 or some nonsense. The ship got delayed or something. And then, don't get me started with the pandemic, being in the pandemic during Spain versus not. But amazing experience, both in terms of working abroad, living abroad, understanding Europe, even for me professionally, understanding the tech scene. One thing I definitely realized is, coming from Silicon Valley and being in Spain, you're somewhat of a celebrity. It's like, tech. I got to meet with more C-suite executives of multi-billion-dollar tech companies than I ever have in my life. And yo puedo hablar español, or
Okay, I hear you. So what made you come back? I mean, if you're pseudo celebrity, work optional, I know you also did work or consult while you were there. Why come back?
Yeah. So one is, my wife did not enjoy our time as much as I did. There are definitely some creature comforts, and fundamentally it is a different world. All right. So I thought it would be kind of like, all right, this is Europe. It's like first world Europe. So it's like America, but they speak Spanish. No. It was like fundamentally different in good ways and bad ways. Small things like supermarkets close on Sunday. If you have a kid and you need milk on a Sunday, this actually is like a non-trivial thing. Stuff closes really early, the bureaucracy to deal with. So this didn't, appeal to her as much. But we had set for ourselves a 2-year time frame. We said we would go for 2 years, and each person had a 6-month veto. After 6 months, someone could say, I hate it so much, I want to move back to America. And then at the end of 2 years, we would discuss in terms of extending. She didn't hate it enough to exercise her veto and force us to move early, but she was not interested in extending it to stay there.
Okay.
One other thing too is, in terms of, I was consulting in Spain and I was working at a startup there. I was leading product at the organization. It was fun and interesting. Spanish salaries are not American salaries. Like, at all. The first job offer I got was for 45,000 full-time job. This was approximately 15 per, like I got bonuses that were like this amount when when working in tech for this entire salary. So actually working in Spain was different. While and then when you work for an American company, you're living the life, right? Because you're essentially making it crazy money, but the time difference became hard, things along those lines. So while I definitely would have stayed either in Spain or personally, I would love to go to another country. I'm obsessed with Holland. I just went back to Holland a couple months ago. Wife was ready to come back, and is one thing I have learned longer in life has been happy wife, happy life.
Absolutely. I second that. So you definitely gave us a lot there, especially some of the pros and cons to being an expatriate, aka someone who's living abroad. I personally have lived in Italy. I lived there for a year in grad school, and I do say I love it. It's a great place to live, great food, but you're right. I have not used Italian since. So I do commend you for picking a language and a country that could be more useful to you after your experience abroad. So I think you've covered all the questions I had about living abroad, preparing your family for that experience, building an online business that can be acquired, and so much more. This is a really good interview. But my last question for you is the signature question I ask all my guests. The name of the podcast is called The Purpose of Money. So I want to know, what is your purpose for money?
Yeah. I've struggled with this a lot over the years, to be honest. Early on in life, I love rap, listen to a lot of rap. And so I always wanted a Rolex. And so a lot of it was like, I want a Rolex and a nice car. And I was like, I want money. And the purpose is to have a Rolex, a nice car, and buy bottles. And I always like to say, when I could afford a Rolex, I was like, I could invest this money instead, or this is like halfway to another rental property. So at some point, then my goals changed, and the point of investing became different. It became to like amass my net worth and grow my net worth and hit certain numbers. As I started to hit those numbers, I kind of started to question, like, well, what is the purpose of having all this net worth and money? So right now, the purpose of money for me is freedom. And I know it's a bit of a cliche thing right now with FIRE community, but I think we are starting to realize that time is one of the things that that doesn't change. We don't get back. We can't earn. It doesn't go back up in a market. It's the one inflexible. I've also realized some things about my own personal self. Corporate America has been hard for me. It is can be tiring and things along those lines. While I loved the experience of both being acquired and joining that company, I actually left recently in July. I have a daughter coming in December, so in just 6 weeks now, we're out for that, and I've committed now to not go back to a full-time role until 2024, and that is because I've have enough with my rental properties and kind of some of the income and how I both manage my money and finance to get some of that freedom. So for me, the purpose of money has been that flexibility. I love that if I were to get laid off or something like that, which happened early in my career, I can survive. If me and my wife want to spend time with a new kid, we have that time. And right now I'm actually pursuing some other pursuits. I'm going to be a professor starting in January. Yeah, I'll be teaching a class on technology, ventures, and marketing at University of Colorado. I started a new newsletter called The Pragmatic Mr. Peters, focused more on this lifestyle design and kind of this freedom and flexibility. And the purpose of money to me is really to both give me the freedom and it is also the safety net. Like the truth is, when bad stuff happens, I feel way more comfortable now than I did, 10 years ago. And with kids and stuff, that's just, it really does help me sleep a lot at night.
That is amazing. So congrats on the baby on the way and the professorship. That's pretty dope. You're big when you start to teach other people stuff and it actually matters because it's a grade behind it. So
Exactly.
congrats. So now I can call you Professor Peters as well. Well, thank you so much for being on the Purpose of Money podcast. Before we leave, I want you to please tell everyone, how do we find you, follow you, and just keep up with the new Damien Peters?
Yeah, pragmaticpeters.com. So that's the new newsletter. It's continuing from actually what we built with Wealth Noir, but this one's going to be, I like to say it's not about me, but I want to deliver value based on kind of what I've done and the things that people find interesting that I've done. I normalize everything that I do. Moving to Spain was just a thing that I did. But at pragmaticpeters.com, and we even have some of the old team with me, you'll be able to find things about taking breaks from work, how to investing in real estate, and really using money to build more freedom and flexibility in your life in a very pragmatic approach.
Yes, pragmatic. I love it. Thank you so much, guys. I'll make sure to include links to everything in the show notes, so make sure you check it out. And don't forget to check out the book recommendations that Damien gave us earlier in the episode. Until next time, keep building generational wealth.